For 20 years, Chike and Nneka of Amado carried a silent, heavy guest on their journeys. It was not a physical load, but an absence, a hollow space in their home that ached to be filled with the sound of a child's laughter. They called it, with a hope that slowly hardened into a quiet, resilient grief, the waiting. Their marriage, a vibrant Igbanku celebrated with flowing palm wine and a colorful train of dancers from both Umuse and Amado, had begun painted in the bright hues of assumed futures. Chike's people had gifted them a sprawling piece of land for a future compound, a promise of lineage. Nneka's mother had stored away soft, precious acquit cloth for swaddling, each pattern telling a story of hope. But the promise remained unfulfilled. The corner of their room, meant for a baby's crib, stood empty, a silent, daily reproach that gathered dust. So, they began to travel. It started logically, at the teaching hospital in Enugu, with doctors in white coats who spoke in sterile, clinical terms of hormones and fallopian tubes. They clung to graphs and charts, their hope a fragile thing in the face of medical jargon. When that yielded nothing, they sought a famous specialist in the bustling, noisy city of Aba, his waiting room a tapestry of anxious faces from across the southeast, all sharing the same silent prayer. Chike's savings from his timber business, once meticulously set aside for school fees at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, were steadily funneled into scans, tests, and procedures that offered only more questions, each one a small erosion of their spirit. When science had no more answers, they turned to the ancient ways and fervent faith. They traveled to the renowned dibia in Omunid, a man whose compound was shrouded in the smoke of rare herbs. He threw his opal seeds, their rattle sounding like bones, and spoke of a spiritual blockage from a long-forgotten arusi that required a complicated sacrifice. Nneka drank the bitter potion he gave her, her face contorted, not from the taste, but from the desperation that forced it down. They climbed the holy mountain at Aruku, their knees sore and hearts pounding, to pray at the grotto where the faithful left handwritten petitions, their own nestled amongst hundreds. They joined the throngs at the mighty river Niger in Onitsha, and with other women, Nneka was bathed in its powerful, brown waters by a prayer warrior, her wrapper soaked and heavy with the weight of her plea. Their old, faithful Peugeot 504 became a silent witness to their suffering, its boot perpetually filled with parcels for relatives who offered well-meaning but piercing advice. Chike, my brother, have you tried the man in Owerri? He is very strong, oh. He made Adeabi from Umuahia conceive twins. Nneka, my daughter, you are too thin. You must eat more garden egg soup and ogba. It strengthens the womb for a son. Each word, though kindly meant, was a tiny needle in their hearts. Through it all, their love was the one constant, a sturdy Iroko tree weathering a perpetual storm. But it was a love tested by the whispers of their communities and the quiet despair of their own hearts. There were nights in cramped, musty guest houses in Abakaliki where the silence was broken only by the chirping of geckos. Nneka would lie on the thin foam mattress, her body feeling like a profound betrayal to her husband, her lineage, and herself. Chike would watch the ceiling fan whirr, its endless circles a metaphor for their journey, his own sour a heavy yam in his stomach, his helplessness a sharper pain than any business loss. On the eve of their 20th anniversary, they found themselves in a small, humid riverside town in Imo State, the end of another fruitless pilgrimage to a woman who claimed to see through the veil of the spiritual world. Her solution, a bath with 7 different leaves at the crossroads at midnight, had left Nneka feeling not cleansed, but raw, exposed, and hollow. The weight of 2 decades felt heavier than the oppressive humidity in the air. They sat on a rough-hewn bench under a giant okwa tree, overlooking the slow, brown waters of the Otomiri River. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and frying plantain from a nearby stall. Perhaps, Chike said, his voice rough with a weariness that had settled deep into his bones, this movement, this endless search, is the only child we were ever meant to have. Perhaps this is our destiny. Nneka didn't answer for a long time. She watched a woman on the opposite bank, effortlessly balancing a basin of wet cloth on her head, a small child tied securely to her back with a colorful wrapper, its head lolling in sleep. The sight, once a trigger for sharp anguish, now evoked a dull, profound exhaustion. "I am tired, Chike," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the river's gentle murmur. "Aemi agu adiwu ememe. My spirit is tired. I am tired of seeing Monidi with their umwaka and feeling a wound that never scars, but only grows wider." He took her hand, her fingers calloused from years of managing their home and farm, cold in his. "Then we stop," he said, the words feeling like a final, surrendering prayer to a God they could no longer name. "No more dibia. No more hospitals for this. No more prayers for a child. Let us go home and live with what we have." Tears finally came, not the hot, angry sobs of earlier years, but a quiet, steady stream of release, as if a dam had broken deep within her soul. She cried for the sons who would never bear the name Chike, for the daughters she would never teach to weave the stories of their people into cloth, for the ancestral line that seemed to end with them in a silent, shameful full stop. He held her as the fireflies began their whimsical dance over the water, his own tears a silent, salty tribute to her pain and their shared loss. The next morning, something had shifted. The frantic, desperate energy that had propelled them for 2 decades was gone, replaced by a profound, aching stillness. They decided to walk through the town's main market, not as seekers with a hidden agenda, but simply as a man and a woman, witnessing life as it was. They came across the town's ancient Ofor tree, its trunk massive and gnarled, scarred by lightning and time. It was a tree of justice and covenant, bearing no fruit that anyone could eat. But under its vast, sheltering branches, the entire community thrived. Children played a frantic game of okwi in its shade, their voices loud and joyful. Old men gathered on wooden stools, drinking palm wine and retelling tales of the land. Market women spread their wares on colorful cloths, protected from the harsh sun. An old woman, her face a beautiful map of wrinkles and wisdom, sat selling ogba and garden eggs. She smiled a gentle, toothless smile at Nneka and offered her a slice of the fresh garden egg. "Nneni, you look like you have carried a heavy load across many rivers. Sit. Rest. The sun is high." Nneka knelt, not to pray for a miracle, but to accept the simple human kindness. She looked at the tree. It was not a fruit tree, but it was the undeniable heart of the community. It gave shelter. It gave a place for life to happen around it. It was deeply, powerfully useful in its own way. She looked up at Chike, and for the first time in 20 years, her gaze was completely clear, unclouded by the ghost of a future that would never be. "The tree isn't barren," she said softly, her voice finding a new, solid strength. "It is just, its purpose is different. It holds the people together. It gives them a center." Chike understood. It was an epiphany. He helped her up and they stood together, their hands linked, looking not at the road for the next bus to another miracle worker, but at the vibrant, bustling life happening right before them. They had ended their quest, and in doing so, had finally arrived. They went back to Amado, to the whispers that now felt like background noise. They cleared out the room meant for a child. Not to make a nursery, but to make a sewing room for Nneka's long-abandoned, gifted hands, and a quiet library for Chike's love of history and philosophy. They began to host the children of their siblings and neighbors, becoming the beloved Uncle Chike and Auntie Nneka, whose compound was always filled with the sound of playing and whose pockets always held sweets or a few naira for ice cream. They used the land from Chike's people to plant an orange orchard, tending to it not with desperation, but with a newfound peace. The acceptance was their final, unspoken offering. It was a surrender so complete, it echoed in the realms they could not see. The year after the orchard was planted, a strange thing happened. The rains came late, and when they did, they were fierce, washing away the topsoil of many farms in Amado. But Chike and Nneka's orchard, nurtured with calm devotion, thrived as if blessed. The oranges grew larger, sweeter, and with a luminous golden hue that seemed to hold captured sunlight within. People came from neighboring villages to buy them, whispering that the fruit had a taste that could lift a heavy spirit. It was during this season of unexpected bounty that the child came. He was found one morning, after a night of a thunderstorm so violent it seemed the sky was tearing at its seams. Nneka, going to inspect her seedlings, saw a bundle nestled in the sacred roots of the great Ofor tree in their own compound. Wrapped not in ordinary cloth, but in a strange, silken moss that shimmered with trapped dew, was a baby boy. His skin seemed to glow with a soft, inner light, and his eyes were not the dark brown of a human infant, but held swirling flecks of gold, like molten metal gazing into eternity. He did not cry, but looked at her with a serene, ancient knowledge that both stilled and terrified her. A whisper, not of wind but of pure clarity, spoke in Nneka's heart. You stopped asking for a child of your womb. So, we have sent you a child of our world. He is our covenant with your acceptance. They named him Chimdindu, my spirit is living. From the beginning, he was different. He never fell ill. When he learned to speak, his words were precise and carried a strange, tangible weight. At 3, he would place his small hands on ailing plants in Nneka's garden, and they would straighten, their leaves deepening to a vibrant, almost electric green. He was a quiet, observant child, drawn to the stories of the elders and the complex patterns of the marketplace, as if studying the very mechanics of life. His first true miracle happened when he was 7. Chike's timber business was on the brink of collapse. A large, costly consignment of mahogany had been seized by corrupt officials. The loss would have been crippling, wiping out years of work. Chimdindu, seeing the deep lines of worry on his father's face, simply asked, "Papa, why don't you talk to the man in the big office in Port Harcourt?" Chike, humoring his strange, wonderful son, replied with a heavy sigh, "And what will I say to such a big man, my son?" "Tell him his son will wake up from the sickness tomorrow," Chimdindu said, his golden eyes unwavering and full of a certainty that was not of a child. A cold shiver, part fear, part awe, ran down Chike's spine. He had heard faint rumors that the powerful commissioner's heir was in a mysterious coma, a fact kept from the public. Driven by a force he didn't understand, a faith in his son that had replaced his faith in miracles, Chike made the journey. He delivered the message not as a threat or a bargain, but as a simple statement from his son. The commissioner, initially furious, was struck by the man's calm conviction. The next day, as stated, the commissioner's son awoke, clear-headed and hungry. By evening, Chike's timber was not only released, but he also had a new, lucrative long-term contract with the state government, delivered with a personal apology. That was the beginning of the transformation. Chimdindu's touch was a conduit for progress, a blessing that flowed through him. He would walk through his mother's expanding sewing cooperative and point to a particular, intricate orchid pattern. "This one, Mama. Make more of this. People from across the sea will want it." And they did. Orders flooded in from European and American boutiques, putting Amado weavers on the global map. He guided his father to invest not just in timber, but in cashew nuts and plantains, sensing market shifts before they happened. He would gently touch a sapling, and it would shoot up, bearing fruit in half the usual time. Their wealth grew, not through ruthless exploitation, but through a harmonious, almost sacred, multiplication that enriched everyone who walked with them. He single-handedly changed their family story. The whispers in Amado that once pitied the barren couple now spoke of them in reverent tones. They were the parents of Ofor, our special first son, the child of the Ofor tree. He built them a modern, spacious bungalow with all the comforts, but insisted on preserving the ancient tree at its very center, its mighty branches now sheltering a beautiful courtyard filled with laughter, light, and the constant presence of grateful visitors. But his greatest gift to Chike and Nneka was the word itself. "Papa, Mama," he said to them one day, his voice now that of a calm, powerful young man, "you have spent 20 years traveling in search of a dream through dust and despair. Now, we will travel in its celebration. The world will bring you its joy." He flew them to Dubai. Nneka, who had never been beyond the borders of Imo State, wept tears of pure, unadulterated awe as she stood at the top of the Burj Khalifa, the entire man-made marvel of a city spread out beneath her like a glittering tapestry of human ambition. Chike, who had known only the dusty, red roads of the southeast, walked barefoot on the pristine, sun-warmed beaches, the gentle waves of the Persian Gulf lapping at his feet, washing away the last remnants of his old sorrow. He took them to Rome. In the immense St. Peter's Basilica, a place they had only seen in faded pamphlets from their parish priest, they lit a thick, beeswax candle, not in desperate supplication, but in profound, overflowing gratitude for a journey they now understood. They saw the snow-capped, majestic Alps of Switzerland, and ate delicious pasta in a sun-drenched Italian piazza, their hearts so full of joy it felt like a new kind of language. On these trips, Chimdindu was their quiet, omnipotent guardian. Flight delays would resolve moments after he glanced at a departure board. The best suites with the most stunning views would become available without a single request. It was as if the universe itself bent and softened to ensure his parents experienced only ease, comfort, and wonder. In the remaining, golden years of their lives, Chike and Nneka knew a peace and a pleasure so deep it felt sacred. Their son, a perfect bridge between the spiritual and the human world, had not just ended their sorrow, he had redeemed it, transforming the bitter soil of their long wait into a fertile ground for miracles. He had taken the pain of their 20-year journey and alchemized it into a global harvest of joy. They passed on within a year of each other, peaceful, fulfilled, and full of days, surrounded by a family that was now all of Amado. At their joint, celebratory burial, Chimdindu stood before the vast community. He did not weep. He simply placed a hand on each of their coffins, made from the wood of the very orchard they had planted in acceptance. From the solid wood, fragrant, unknown flowers of breathtaking beauty bloomed instantly, their sweet, powerful scent filling the entire village for a week, a final, living blessing from the son of two worlds to the parents who had learned that the greatest miracles bloom only after the longest rains.